My children chose my daughter-in-law's party over my life, so I left them behind. My name is Josephine. I'm 63 years old and spent 4 decades as a nurse before retiring last year. I never imagined my 3 adult children would choose a house-warming party over rushing to my hospital bedside when doctors said I might not survive. The paramedics had to call 911 for me because none of my kids answered my desperate calls. When they finally got the message that this could be my last chance to see them, they still chose her party instead. That empty hospital bed with just my letter taught them the hardest lesson of all. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe to hear how I finally reclaimed my dignity after years of family betrayal. After graduating from nursing school in 1981, I dedicated my life to caring for others. My husband Frank and I were so happy when our first son, Michael, was born a year later. Our daughter, Sarah, followed 3 years after, and our youngest, Thomas, completed our family when I was 26. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Everything changed when Frank was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. He fought hard for 8 months, but the disease took him when our children were still so young. Michael was 17, Sarah was 14, and Thomas just 12. I became both mother and father overnight. I worked double shifts at the hospital to support us financially. There were nights I came home at 2 in the morning, slept for 4 hours, then got up to make breakfast and send the kids to school before heading to my second job at a local clinic. Every moment not working was devoted to my children. Michael needed help with college applications. Sarah struggled with math and required tutoring I couldn't afford, but somehow managed to provide. Thomas developed anxiety after losing his father and needed extra emotional support. Their birthdays were sacred to me. I remember when Michael turned 18, I saved for 6 months to buy him the laptop he needed for college. For Sarah's sweet 16, I stayed up 3 nights straight between shifts to sew her dream dress when we couldn't afford the boutique version. When Thomas won his high school science fair, I swapped 4 shifts to be there, cheering louder than anyone. I never remarried. Dating seemed impossible with my schedule, and frankly, my children needed all the time and energy I had. They were my world. I attended every parent-teacher conference, soccer game, and school play. I bandaged every wound, physical and emotional. When Michael got his heart broken by his college girlfriend, I drove 4 hours to his campus to comfort him. When Sarah struggled with depression, her sophomore year, I took family leave to make sure she got the help she needed. The children grew up and built their own lives. Michael became an engineer, married Amanda 3 years ago, and they live about 30 minutes from my house. Sarah works in marketing, married her college sweetheart Dylan, and lives 45 minutes away. Thomas works in IT and remained single, living downtown about an hour from me. Things changed dramatically 5 years ago when Sarah married Dylan. It was a beautiful wedding, but I noticed how her priorities shifted immediately. Family dinners became less frequent, as her in-laws seemed to claim every holiday. Still, we maintained a close relationship, with weekly phone calls and monthly visits. The real trouble began when Michael married Amanda 3 years ago. From our first meeting, Amanda made it clear she found me intrusive. She would make comments about my modest home, saying things like, "It must be hard living in such a small space after raising 3 kids here." She would rearrange my kitchen while criticizing my cooking. When I offered advice about their renovations based on my years of home ownership, she would smile tightly and say, "That's so outdated, Josephine. Things are different now." Gradually, Michael visited less and less. He always had an excuse. Amanda was tired. Amanda had planned something else. Amanda didn't feel well. When they did visit, Amanda would check her watch constantly or find fault with everything from my furniture to my gardening. Thomas remained my most reliable child, but even he became increasingly busy with work and his own social life. Our Sunday dinners dwindled from weekly to monthly to when we can make it. Last Thanksgiving, for the first time in my children's lives, I ate alone. Michael and Sarah both went to their in-laws. Thomas had promised to come but called last minute, saying he was stuck at work on an emergency project. I donated the turkey I'd prepared to a local shelter and ate a frozen dinner in front of the television. My health had been declining for months. Persistent fatigue, occasional chest pains, shortness of breath. I didn't tell my children because I didn't want to burden them. I had an appointment scheduled with my doctor for the following month. I never made it to that appointment. I woke up at 4:30 on a Saturday morning with a crushing pain in my chest. It felt like an elephant was sitting on me, and I couldn't catch my breath. My left arm had gone numb, and a cold sweat covered my body. As a nurse for 40 years, I knew exactly what was happening. I was having a heart attack. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I called Michael first. The phone rang and went to voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling. "Michael, it's Mom. I think I'm having a heart attack. I need help. Please call me back immediately." I tried Sarah next. Again, voicemail. "Sarah, please, I need help. I'm having chest pains. It's an emergency." And Thomas didn't answer either. I left an increasingly desperate message. "Thomas, I can't breathe properly. I need someone to call an ambulance. Please call me back right away." I tried Michael again. Still no answer. The pain was intensifying. I knew I couldn't wait any longer and dialed 911 myself. "911, what's your emergency?" "I'm having a heart attack," I managed to say before another wave of pain hit me. The operator stayed on the line while dispatching paramedics. I crawled to my front door, unlocked it, and collapsed on the floor near the entrance so they could find me easily. The whole time I kept thinking one of my children would call back. No one did. The paramedics arrived within minutes, though it felt like hours. They immediately began treatment, attaching monitors to my chest and starting an IV. "Is there someone we can call for you?" one of the paramedics asked as they lifted me onto the stretcher. "I already called my children," I said. They didn't answer. The ambulance ride was terrifying. Lights flashing, sirens wailing, and the constant fear that I might die alone. The paramedic kept talking to me, trying to keep me conscious as my vitals fluctuated dangerously. I remember thinking about Frank, wondering if I would see him soon, and feeling sad that my last interaction with my children had been their ignored calls for help. At the hospital, I was rushed into the emergency room. Doctors and nurses swarmed around me, connecting more monitors, drawing blood, taking scans. The cardiologist arrived quickly, reviewing my ECG results with a serious expression. "Mrs. Walsh, you're having a significant cardiac event. We need to get you into surgery immediately. We're going to perform an emergency angioplasty to clear the blockage in your heart." I nodded, unable to speak through the oxygen mask. A nurse leaned down beside me. "Is there anyone we should call family?" "My children," I whispered, giving her their numbers. I already tried, but they didn't answer. The nurse promised to keep trying while they prepared me for surgery. As they wheeled me toward the catheterization lab, I heard her at the nurse's station, phone in hand. "Hello, is this Michael Walsh? This is Mercy Hospital calling. Your mother, Josephine, has been admitted with a severe cardiac event. Yes, a heart attack. The doctors are taking her into emergency surgery now. It's very serious. Yes, I understand your wife is having a party, but the doctor believes you should come immediately." From the other conversations I overheard as I waited, I learned all three of my children had finally answered. All three gave the same reason for not coming. Amanda, my daughter-in-law, was hosting her housewarming party that evening. They couldn't miss it. They would come tomorrow. The surgeon, Dr. Patel, came to see me before the procedure. Her face was compassionate but troubled. "Mrs. Walsh, I understand your children have been notified, but aren't coming immediately." I nodded, tears sliding down my face. "Would you like me to speak with them, to explain the severity, please?" I whispered. Dr. Patel stepped away, and I heard her making calls. Her voice was direct and uncompromising. "This is Dr. Patel, your mother's cardiologist. I need to be very clear. Your mother's condition is critical. There is a significant chance she may not survive this procedure. If you want to see her, you need to come now. This could be your last chance." She returned to my side, her expression telling me everything I needed to know. None of them were coming, not even after being told I might die. "Let's focus on saving your life, Mrs. Walsh," Dr. Patel said gently. "That's all that matters right now." As they wheeled me into surgery, I felt something inside me break. It wasn't my heart, at least, not physically. It was my illusion that my sacrifices had created the loving family I thought I had. I woke up in the ICU, groggy from anesthesia and pain medication. My first conscious thought was to look around for my children. The room was empty except for a nurse monitoring my vitals. "You're awake," she said with a warm smile. "The surgery went well. Dr. Patel was able to clear the blockage and place a stent." "My children?" I asked, my voice hoarse. The nurse's smile faltered slightly. "No visitors yet, but I can check if anyone's in the waiting room." She returned a few minutes later, her expression carefully neutral. "No one has arrived yet, but it's still early." It was nearly noon. The surgery had taken place at 8 in the morning. The party wouldn't have gone that late. They should have been there. Throughout that first day, different nurses and aides would check on me. Each would ask about family, and I would watch their expressions shift from professional interest to poorly disguised pity when I explained no one was coming. One nurse, Amelia, seemed particularly affected by my situation. "I've been a nurse for 30 years too," she told me during her break, sitting in the chair beside my bed. "My daughter is a doctor now because she saw how much I loved caring for people. I can't imagine her not being here if I were in your situation." I nodded, unable to speak through my embarrassment and grief. Amelia patted my hand. "Family isn't always who we expect them to be," she said gently. That night, I received 3 text messages, one from each child. Michael: "Hope you're feeling better, Mom. Amanda's party went great. Everyone asked about you. We'll try to visit tomorrow. Sarah." "Just checking in. The doctor said you're stable now. Get some rest and we'll see you soon. Love you. Thomas." Sorry about today. Got caught up helping with party setup. Definitely coming tomorrow. Need anything? I didn't respond to any of them. What could I say? That I understood a party was more important than their mother's life. That I forgave them for leaving me to face death alone. I couldn't find it in myself to comfort them about their neglect. The second day brought more of the same. No visits, just texts with excuses. Amanda was tired from hosting. They needed to clean up after the party. They'd definitely come the next day. On the third day, I received a surprising number of visitors, but none were my children. Former colleagues from the hospital had heard about my condition and came to sit with me, bring flowers, and offer support. My neighbor, Martha, brought homemade soup and promised to water my plants. My old friend Teresa from nursing school drove 2 hours to spend the afternoon with me. Still no sign of Michael, Sarah, or Thomas. Dr. Patel came by to discuss my condition and recovery. "You're doing remarkably well physically," she said. "The stent is functioning properly and your vitals are stable. We'll need to discuss lifestyle changes, medication, and follow-up care." "When can I go home?" I asked. Dr. Patel hesitated. "Normally, we'd discharge a patient in your condition after about 5 days, but you'll need support at home. Is there anyone who can stay with you for the first week or 2? I thought about my empty house, my children who couldn't even visit, let alone care for me. The tears I'd been holding back for days finally spilled over. "No," I admitted. "There's no one." A hospital social worker named Kevin came to see me later that day. He discussed options for my recovery, including short-term rehabilitation facilities, where I could regain my strength before returning home alone. As he talked, something shifted inside me. The hurt and disappointment I'd been feeling transformed into a slow, burning anger. Not a destructive rage, but a clarifying force that helped me see my situation with new eyes. For decades, I had given everything to my children. I had sacrificed my health, my social life, my chances at romance after Frank died, all to give them the best possible life. And when I needed them most, they chose a party thrown by a woman who actively disliked me. I deserved better. I deserved respect, consideration, and love. If my children couldn't provide that, perhaps it was time I stopped organizing my life around them. That night, I made a phone call. I should have made years ago. Julia, it's Josephine, your sister. I need your help. My sister Julia and I had grown apart over the years, largely because my caretaking responsibilities had left little time for maintaining our relationship. When Frank died, she had offered to have me and the children move to Arizona to be near her, but I had declined, not wanting to uproot the kids after they'd already lost their father. Over time, our communication dwindled to holiday cards and occasional phone calls. But when I called her from my hospital bed and explained my situation, her response was immediate and unconditional. "I'm booking a flight right now," she said, "and when you're well enough, you're coming home with me. My guest house has been empty since Mom passed. It's yours for as long as you want it." For the first time since waking up in the hospital, I felt a glimmer of hope. While I continued my physical recovery, I began making arrangements for a complete life change. Julia recommended her estate attorney, who was able to consult with me remotely. I updated my will, removing my children as primary beneficiaries, and instead creating trust funds for any future grandchildren's education, with the bulk going to nursing scholarships and cardiac care research. I called my neighbor, Martha's son, who worked in real estate. He had always admired my little house with its garden and had once jokingly said, if I ever wanted to sell, he'd buy it in a heartbeat. It wasn't a joke anymore. He offered a fair price with the flexibility of allowing me time to remove my personal belongings. The social worker, Kevin, helped arrange for my transfer to a rehabilitation facility in Arizona once I was stable enough to travel. My health insurance would cover the short stay while I regained my strength. My former colleagues organized a packing party, coming to my house in shifts to carefully box up my most treasured possessions. They labeled everything meticulously and arranged for shipping to Julia's address. The hardest part was deciding what to do about family mementos. In the end, I selected a few precious items to take with me. Photographs mostly from happier times. The rest, including Frank's watch collection he had intended for the boys, Sarah's bronzed baby shoes, the handmade cards and school projects I'd saved, I organized into 3 boxes, one for each child. With each box, I included a personal letter. Not the main letter explaining my departure that would be left at the hospital, but individual notes addressing my unique relationship with each child and my hopes for their future, even if I wasn't part of it. For Michael, I included his father's wedding ring and the journal Frank had kept during Michael's first year of life. "Your father would be disappointed in the man you've become," I wrote. "Not because you married someone I struggle to connect with, that's your choice to make, but because you've forgotten that strength of character means honoring your commitments, especially to family. I hope one day you find the courage to make your own decisions again." For Sarah, I left the pearl necklace my mother had given me on my wedding day, meant to be passed down. "You were always my sensitive child," I wrote, "the one who felt everything so deeply. I see you struggling to balance everyone's needs and failing to honor your own heart in the process. Remember the girl who stood up to bullies and spoke truth, even when it was difficult. Find her again." For Thomas, I included the first computer Frank had built with him, outdated but symbolic of their bond. You were too young when your father died to remember how much he loved teaching you about technology. This old machine holds his fingerprints and his hope for your future. You have his kindness, Thomas, but kindness without action is just sentiment. Be the man who shows up, not just the one who sends texts. I arranged for these boxes to be delivered to my house on the day I knew my children would discover my empty hospital bed. The letter I left at the hospital was straightforward, but heartfelt. Michael, Sarah, and Thomas, by the time you read this, I will be gone, not from this world, but from yours. For 40 years, I have given you everything: my time, my love, my care, and my sacrifice. When I faced death alone in that hospital room, I realized the painful truth. I have failed as a mother because I never taught you how to be there for others. The doctors told you I might die, and you chose a housewarming party instead. There is no coming back from that revelation. No mother should have to beg her children for care and attention. I have moved to Arizona to live near my sister, Julia. I am starting a new chapter of my life where I will prioritize those who prioritize me. My house has been sold and my affairs have been put in order. This isn't a punishment, it's self-preservation. Perhaps someday we can rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation and guilt. Until then, I wish you well and hope Amanda's party was worth it. Mom, I asked a compassionate nurse to leave the letter on my pillow exactly 1 week after my surgery, when I knew I would be safely on my way to Arizona. By then, my children had moved from daily texts, promising to visit tomorrow, to increasingly concerned messages, wondering why I wasn't responding. On the morning of my departure, Julia arrived at the hospital with flowers and a wheelchair. "Ready for your jailbreak, sis?" she asked with the same mischievous smile I remembered from our childhood. As we left the hospital, I looked back one last time. The anger that had propelled my decisions had faded somewhat, replaced by a profound sadness, but also a sense of liberation. I was 63 years old. It wasn't too late to start again. 1 week after my heart attack, exactly as I had arranged, my 3 children finally came to the hospital together. By then, I was already settled in Julia's guest house in Sedona, my new cell phone comfortably silent since I hadn't given them the number. I wasn't there to witness their arrival, of course, but Julia's friend Barbara works as an administrator at the hospital and later described the scene to me. Michael arrived first, carrying a small bouquet of grocery store flowers, Amanda conspicuously absent. Sarah and Thomas came together shortly after, both looking harried and guilty. They approached the nurse's station asking for my room number. The charge nurse, who had been briefed on the situation, gave them a cool look. "Room 312. But you should know your mother hasn't had any visitors from family since she arrived. Not one." My children had the grace to look ashamed as they walked to my room. They found the bed empty, freshly made with my letter propped against the pillow. Barbara was walking by when she heard Sarah's cry of distress. She paused outside the door, not eavesdropping exactly, but concerned enough to linger. Michael read the letter aloud, his voice breaking by the end. When he finished, the silence stretched for several moments before erupting into accusations. "This is your fault," Sarah said to Michael. "You and Amanda with that stupid party." "My fault," Michael shot back. "You weren't here either. None of us were." "I called every day," Thomas protested weakly. "Calling isn't visiting," Sarah snapped. "We all know Mom needed more than that." They continued arguing as they left the hospital, their voices echoing down the corridor. From what I later learned, they went directly to my house using the spare key hidden in the garden gnome. Instead of finding me there, they discovered the 3 boxes I had left the house, otherwise emptied of personal belongings, and a sold sign already planted in the front yard. Michael called Amanda immediately, putting her on speaker in my kitchen, where they had gathered around their boxes. "Mom's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "She moved to Arizona because none of us visited her in the hospital." Amanda's response was predictably dismissive. "She's obviously trying to manipulate you. Give it a week, she'll be calling for money or help with something." Sarah's husband Dylan, who had joined them at the house, had a different reaction. "Are you serious right now? Your mother-in-law nearly died, and you're calling her manipulative for being upset. No one visited. What is wrong with you people?" This sparked a fresh round of arguments with Amanda, defending the importance of their housewarming party. Michael caught between his wife and siblings, Sarah crying while Dylan supported her, and Thomas sitting silently reading his personal letter over and over. The argument ended with Dylan taking Sarah home, Thomas leaving without a word, and Michael calling me repeatedly, each voicemail more desperate than the last. "Mom, please call me back. We didn't understand how serious it was. Mom, we're so sorry. Please tell us where you are in Arizona. Mom, Amanda feels terrible. We all do. Please give us a chance to make this right." But I had already changed my number, and the calls went to an automated message saying the number was no longer in service. The siblings stopped speaking to each other after that day. Sarah blamed Michael for putting Amanda first. Michael resented Sarah's self-righteousness, given that she hadn't visited either. Thomas withdrew from both of them, his guilt manifesting as avoidance. Amanda initially dismissed the whole situation, telling friends and family I was being dramatic and would return once I got over myself. When weeks passed, without word from me, however, even she began to realize the gravity of what had happened. My children hired a private investigator to find me, but Julia and I had been careful. I had no social media presence to track. My new phone was in Julia's name. The rehabilitation center had strict privacy policies. We were essentially hiding in plain sight, not being secretive, but simply starting fresh without digital breadcrumbs. 3 months passed. The holidays approached. For the first time in their lives, my children faced the prospect of Christmas without their mother. Arizona welcomed me with open arms and healing sunshine. Julia's guest house was a small but beautiful casita with terracotta floors, whitewashed walls, and a private patio overlooking red rock formations. After decades in the same small house in the Midwest, this felt like landing on another planet, vibrant and full of possibilities. My physical recovery progressed steadily. The cardiac rehabilitation program helped me regain strength and develop healthier habits. Each day, I walked a little farther along the desert trails, my body growing stronger as my mind found a new kind of peace. Julia introduced me to her friends, a lively group of retirees who hiked, played cards, volunteered, and lived life with an energy I had forgotten existed. No one here knew me as just a mother or a widow or a nurse. I was simply Josephine Julia's sister, from back east, starting a new chapter. I found a therapist, Dr. Mendez, who specialized in family estrangement and life transitions. Our weekly sessions helped me work through the complex emotions I was experiencing, grief and liberation, paradoxically intertwined. "You're mourning the family you thought you had," she explained during one session, while simultaneously celebrating your freedom from expectations that were hurting you. Both reactions are valid. I started volunteering at the local hospital gift shop 2 afternoons a week. The familiar medical environment was comforting, but without the stress of direct patient care. I enjoyed chatting with visitors, helping them select the perfect item to brighten a loved one's stay. Sometimes I would watch families rushing to be with their sick relatives and feel a pang of what might have been. Julia and I rebuilt our relationship, making up for decades of distance. We cooked together, traveled to nearby national parks, and stayed up late sharing memories of our childhood and the divergent paths our lives had taken. "I always envied how close you were with your kids," Julia admitted one evening as we sat watching the sunset. "I thought my decision not to have children had left me missing something essential. Now, I'm not so sure." "Family is who shows up," I said, reaching for her hand. "You showed up when it mattered most." Meanwhile, my children's calls, texts, and emails continued to accumulate on my old devices, which I kept turned off in a drawer. Dr. Mendez suggested I might want to read them eventually as part of my healing process, but not until I felt strong enough to maintain my boundaries. As Thanksgiving approached, I felt a familiar sadness creeping in. Last year, I had spent the holiday alone with a frozen dinner. This year, I would be with Julia and her friends, but the absence of my children still ached. I was sitting on my patio, contemplating whether to look at my old messages, when Julia came running from the main house. "Josephine, there's someone here to see you." Standing beside her was Thomas, my youngest, looking thin and nervous, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. My heart lurched at the sight of him. I stood frozen, unsure whether to embrace him or send him away. Julia sensed my uncertainty. "I'll leave you two to talk," she said, squeezing my arm before retreating to her house. Thomas and I stared at each other across the patio. He spoke first. "I hired a private investigator," he admitted. "They couldn't find you, but they found Julia's address. I took a chance." "Why now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Because I couldn't bear another holiday knowing what we did to you," he said, tears filling his eyes. "Because I read my letter every day and realized I don't want to be the man who just sends texts. I want to be the man who shows up." We talked for hours. Thomas explained the chaos that had erupted in the family since my departure. Sarah had separated from Dylan briefly, their arguments about loyalty and family values, exposing deeper issues in their marriage. Michael and Amanda were in counseling, their perfect facade crumbling under the weight of guilt and resentment. The three siblings had barely spoken to each other, each blaming the others while avoiding their own culpability. "We were so busy with our own lives," Thomas said, "that we forgot who made those lives possible. We took you for granted because you were always there no matter what, until you weren't." I listened, not offering absolution, but not turning him away either. When he asked if he could stay for a few days, I agreed with one condition. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "My life is here now. If you want to be part of it, you need to respect that." Thomas nodded, understanding the boundary I was setting. That Thanksgiving, we had dinner at Julia's table. The conversation was sometimes awkward, sometimes tearful, but ultimately healing. Thomas flew home with plans to return for Christmas, this time with Sarah, who had called Julia's house in tears after learning Thomas had found me. Michael remained resistant, influenced by Amanda's insistence that I was being unnecessarily harsh. But even that was beginning to change. The last time Thomas had spoken with his brother Michael, had asked tentative questions about my new life, suggesting the ice was slowly thawing. I maintained my boundaries firmly, but with compassion. I would rebuild relationships with my children, but on new terms, with mutual respect at the foundation. 6 months after my heart attack and dramatic departure, my life in Arizona had taken solid shape. My small casita felt like home, decorated with carefully chosen items from my old life and new treasures found in local art galleries. My health had improved significantly, my diet Mediterranean, my daily routine including yoga and hiking. My relationships with my children were evolving at different paces. Thomas visited monthly, our bond strengthening with each trip. He had moved into his own apartment, subtly distancing himself from Amanda's influence, and had started dating a kind physician assistant named Lucia, who reminded me a little of myself in my younger days. Sarah and I spoke weekly on video calls. After her initial tearful visit at Christmas, we had established a cautious but warm connection. She had reconciled with Dylan, their marriage stronger after honest conversations about family dynamics and priorities. They were talking about having children, and Sarah often asked for my advice about parenthood, listening with new appreciation for my experience. Michael remained the most distant, though tiny shoots of reconciliation had begun to appear. He still lived with Amanda, but had started calling me directly every few weeks, our conversations brief, but increasingly genuine. Amanda had not apologized, and likely never would, but she had stopped actively preventing Michael from contacting me. I made it clear to all three children that while I was open to rebuilding our relationships, I would never again organize my life around their convenience or tolerate being taken for granted. Love required respect, and respect required effort. Those who couldn't meet that standard wouldn't have access to my heart or home. This boundary setting, which would have seemed impossible to me a year earlier, had paradoxically improved the relationships worth saving. By valuing myself, I had taught my children to value me too. Dr. Mendez called this the gift of appropriate distance. In our final therapy session, she smiled approvingly as I described hosting both Thomas and Sarah for my birthday weekend. "You've done the hardest thing a parent can do," she said. "You've allowed your children to experience the consequences of their actions while keeping the door open for genuine growth." The unexpected gift in all of this was my relationship with Julia. After decades apart, we had become best friends and confidants. Her wisdom and unconditional support had been my lifeline, and our shared laughter had been my medicine. As I celebrated my 64th birthday with my sister, my youngest son, and my daughter, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought me to this peaceful place. The heart attack that nearly killed me had ultimately saved me by forcing me to recognize my worth and demand that others recognize it too. That evening, while Thomas and Sarah washed dishes and Julia prepared coffee, I stepped onto the patio and watched the desert sunset paint the red rocks gold and purple. I thought about Frank, wondering if he would approve of my choices. I believed he would. He had always encouraged me to stand up for myself, a lesson I had finally learned. When I heard the patio door open, I turned to see all three of them, Julia, Thomas, and Sarah, coming to join me with cake and candles. "Make a wish, Mom," Sarah said, her eyes bright with tears and love. I closed my eyes, blew out the candles, and made a simple wish, not for my children's return to my old life, but for continued courage to live my new one fully with boundaries intact and heart wide open. Have you ever had to walk away from family to find yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries, and I hope my journey has helped you reflect on your own. If you found meaning in my story, please like and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences of finding strength after betrayal. Remember that it's never too late to start over and prioritize your own well-being. Thank you for being part of this healing journey with me.